The world you live in is not the result of a grand plan or a series of calculated masterstrokes by brilliant visionaries. It is a fragile house of cards built on a foundation of absolute, unadulterated stupidity. Every border on a map, every law you follow, and the very language you speak exists because someone, somewhere, was a complete idiot for 5 seconds. We like to believe in destiny because the alternative is admitting that our entire civilization is just a series of car crashes we've rebranded as progress. Number 1. The year is 1914, and the air in Sarajevo is thick with the scent of cheap tobacco and impending doom. Archduke Franz Ferdinand is surviving assassination attempts like a character in a bad action movie, but his driver doesn't have the updated GPS of the 20th century. Because Leopold Loika took a wrong turn into a narrow side street and stalled the engine, he stopped the car exactly 5 feet away from a surprised assassin eating a sandwich. It's like trying to avoid a puddle and accidentally backing your car into a nuclear reactor. The smell of exhaust fumes and the deafening crack of a pistol echoing off the stone walls of a dead-end street. Because of this one wrong turn, 16 million people died, 4 empires collapsed, and the map of the modern world was drawn in blood and permanent marker. Number 2. In 1218, Genghis Khan didn't want to destroy the Khwarezmian Empire. He actually wanted to open a peaceful trade route and sell some silk. He sent a caravan of diplomats and gifts, but a local governor named Inalhuk decided they looked like spies and had them all executed for no reason. It's like someone sending you a friend request and a gift card, and you respond by burning down their house and kicking their dog. The sight of a gold-trimmed silk robe being torn apart in the dirt and the sound of a city gate being slammed shut on the last chance for peace. Because of this one governor's insecurity, the Mongols wiped the entire empire off the face of the earth and changed the genetic makeup of half the planet. Number 3. In 1928, Alexander Fleming was a brilliant scientist who was also remarkably bad at doing his own dishes. He left a pile of Petri dishes in a dirty sink and went on vacation, allowing a stray mold spore to drift through an open window and land in the trash. It is like winning the lottery because you were too lazy to take out the garbage for 3 weeks straight. The sharp, medicinal smell of blue-green mold eating through a colony of deadly bacteria in a cluttered, dusty laboratory. Because of this one man's messy kitchen habits, the age of antibiotics was born, and billions of people are alive today who would have otherwise died from a scratch. Number 4. The Dutch discovered Australia in 1606, over a century before Captain Cook, but they took one look at the dry coast and decided it was a useless wasteland. They sailed away because they couldn't find any spices or gold immediately visible from the deck of their ship. It's like finding a treasure chest, seeing that the lock is a bit rusty, and throwing the whole thing back into the ocean out of pure annoyance. The sound of a heavy wooden rudder turning back toward the horizon and the sight of a massive, untapped continent disappearing into the mist. Because of this one impatient scouting report, the entire southern hemisphere speaks English today instead of Dutch. We are sprinting through a minefield of human incompetence, and the stakes are getting higher with every second. The reality of your existence is hanging by a thread made of ego, bad weather, and people who simply refuse to listen to common sense. Number 5. In 1453, the legendary walls of Constantinople were considered the most impenetrable fortification in the entire known world. The Ottoman army was hammering at the gates, but the city only fell because someone literally forgot to lock a small side door called the Kirkeporta. A few soldiers wandered through an unlocked gate like they were looking for a late-night snack and ended an empire that had lasted for over 1,000 years. It's like spending $1 billion on a state-of-the-art home security system and then leaving the back window open for the cat. The cold, metallic click of a latch that failed to catch and the sight of a shadow slipping into the heart of the Christian world. Because of this one forgotten bolt, the Middle Ages ended instantly. The Renaissance was triggered by fleeing scholars, and the entire balance of global power shifted east. Number 6. In 1776, a British soldier named Patrick Ferguson had a clear shot at a high-ranking American officer who had wandered onto the battlefield. Ferguson was a gentleman and felt it was unsportsmanlike to shoot a man in the back, so he lowered his rifle and let the officer ride away into the fog. That officer was George Washington, and if Ferguson had pulled the trigger, the American Revolution would have died in a muddy field in Pennsylvania. It is like having the chance to stop a forest fire with a single cup of water, and deciding to save the water because you don't want to get your boots wet. The smell of damp gunpowder and the heavy silence of a finger resting on a trigger that refused to move. Because of this one moment of misplaced politeness, the United States exists as a superpower today instead of being a footnote in a British history textbook. Number 7. In 1962, during the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis, a Soviet submarine was trapped deep underwater and surrounded by American destroyers dropping practice depth charges. The captain and the political officer believed World War III had already started and decided to launch a nuclear torpedo that would have vaporized the American fleet. The only reason you are breathing right now is that a third officer named Vasily Arkhipov refused to give his mandatory approval for the launch. It is like two people in a car wanting to drive off a cliff and the guy in the back seat pulling the emergency brake at the very last millisecond. The sound of a heavy metal key scraping against the lock and the humid, pressurized silence of a submarine holding its breath under the weight of the ocean. Because of this one man's stubbornness in a cramped, sweating metal tube, the Northern Hemisphere was saved from becoming a radioactive wasteland. Number 8. In 1999, NASA lost a $1-100- and $20-5- million Mars orbiter because one team used metric units while the other team used English imperial units. The spacecraft hit the Martian atmosphere at the wrong angle and disintegrated into a ball of fire because nobody checked the math on the conversion. It's like trying to bake a cake and confusing teaspoons with gallons, only the cake is a robotic masterpiece on another planet. The sight of a high-tech control room going dead silent as a tiny decimal point error destroys years of human labor. Because of this one middle school math mistake, our understanding of the red planet was set back by a decade and millions of taxpayer dollars vanished into the void. The clock is ticking on human civilization and the primary cause of death is looking like a simple lack of basic spatial awareness. We are hurtling through history at terminal velocity, guided by people who can't even agree on which way is up. Number 9. In 1862, during the American Civil War, a Confederate messenger accidentally dropped a secret set of orders wrapped around 3 cheap cigars in a meadow. 2 Union soldiers found the cigars, read the plans, and handed them to General McClellan, revealing exactly how the Southern Army was divided. It's like losing the winning lottery ticket and the keys to your house because you really wanted to make sure your tobacco stayed dry in your pocket. The smell of sweet, unlit tobacco mixing with the morning dew on a piece of paper that held the fate of a nation. Because of these 3 lost cigars, the Union won the Battle of Antietam, which gave Lincoln the political cover to pass the Emancipation Proclamation. Number 10. In 1941, the Japanese fleet was steaming toward Pearl Harbor, but they were spotted on radar by 2 privates who were just learning how to use the new technology. When they reported a massive cloud of planes approaching, their superior officer told them it was probably just a flight of American B-17s and to ignore it. It's like seeing a tidal wave on the horizon and deciding it's probably just a very enthusiastic group of surfers coming in for lunch. The frantic green glow of a radar screen and the sound of a telephone being hung up by a man who was too tired to be bothered by the truth. Because of this one, don't worry about it. The United States was dragged into World War II, changing the global order and the face of modern warfare forever. Number 11. In 1846, a group of pioneers known as the Donner Party decided to take a shortcut suggested by a guidebook author named Lansford Hastings. Hastings had never actually traveled the route himself, but he sold the idea anyway because it looked shorter on a flat theoretical map in his office. It is like following a stranger into a dark alley, because he told you it as a shortcut to the grocery store, even though he's never been to your neighborhood. The sound of wagon wheels snapping against jagged rocks and the terrifying realization that the shortcut was actually an impassable mountain range. Because of one man's fraudulent marketing, a group of families was trapped in the snow and forced to eat each other just to survive the winter. Number 12. In 1899, a scientist named Nikola Tesla claimed he had received radio signals from Mars, which sent the scientific world into a massive decades-long frenzy. The reality is that he had likely just intercepted interference from a colleague's experiments or a natural pulsar he didn't understand yet. It is like hearing a radiator hiss in an old house and convincing yourself that you've finally established a dialogue with the ghost of a Victorian king. The crackle of static on a cold copper wire and the sight of a genius staring into the dark, thinking he was the first man to talk to the stars. Because of this one misidentified signal, the search for extraterrestrial life became a global obsession, leading to the creation of SETI and the modern space race. The velocity of our collective failure is reaching a breaking point where the line between tragedy and comedy completely dissolves. We are living in a world sculpted by people who made decisions with the foresight of a goldfish in a blender. Number 13. In 1912, the Titanic was cruising through the North Atlantic while the only key to the binoculars locker was accidentally left in the pocket of a sailor who had been bumped from the crew. The lookouts were forced to rely on their bare eyes in the pitch-black night, unable to spot the iceberg until it was already tearing through the hull. It is like trying to drive a car at 80 miles an hour in a rainstorm after someone stole your glasses and painted your windshield black. The biting chill of the salt spray and the panicked squint of a man looking into a dark horizon that was about to swallow him whole. Because of one forgotten key in a sailor's pocket, the world's most famous unsinkable ship is a rusted grave and maritime safety laws were rewritten in blood. Number 14. In 1588, the Spanish Armada was defeated not just by English ships, but by a massive, unexpected storm that the Spanish king's experts said wouldn't happen. They ignored the seasonal weather patterns of the North Sea because they believed God would personally hold back the clouds for a Catholic victory. It is like trying to have a picnic in the middle of a hurricane because you reconvince the weather is a fan of your specific political party. The sound of splintering oak masts and the sight of a 1,000-ton warship being tossed around like a plastic toy in a bathtub. Because of this one meteorological ego trip, England became the dominant naval power on the planet, and the Spanish Empire began its long, slow slide into irrelevance. Number 15. In 1907, an aspiring young artist was rejected from the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts because the professors thought his paintings lacked human feeling. The frustrated artist, who had no backup plan and a lot of pent-up rage, decided to go into politics instead of trying to improve his brushwork. It is like failing a cooking class and deciding that the only logical response is to burn down the entire city out of pure spite. The smell of turpentine and the sight of a rejection letter sitting on a cheap wooden table in a cold, lonely apartment. Because of the subjective taste of a few art critics, Adolf Hitler traded his palette for a podium, and the world was dragged into the darkest chapter in human history. Number 16. In 1867, the Russian Tsar sold Alaska to the United States for about 2 cents an acre because he thought it was just a useless, frozen block of ice. He was short on cash and figured he was tricking the Americans into buying a giant, empty refrigerator that would never produce a single ruble of profit. It's like selling a dusty old box in your attic for $5, only to find out later it was filled with solid gold bars and the secret to eternal life. The scratch of a quill on a treaty and the smug smile of a ruler who thought he had just pulled off the greatest scam of the century. Because of this one short-sighted real estate deal, the U.S. gained a massive strategic foothold and trillions of dollars in gold, oil, and timber. The inertia of our own mistakes is now the only thing keeping the planet spinning on its axis. We are entering the home stretch where the accidents aren't just local disasters, they are global extinction events in the making. Number 17. In 1983, a Soviet early warning satellite reported that 5 American nuclear missiles had been launched and were screaming toward Moscow at Mach speeds. The protocol demanded an immediate retaliatory strike, which would have ended human civilization before the sun went down that evening. It is like seeing a spider on your arm and deciding the only reasonable solution is to douse yourself in gasoline and light a match. The flickering red glare of a computer screen and the sound of a cooling fan whirring in a bunker while a man's heart hammers against his ribs. Because of one officer named Stanislav Petrov who correctly guessed it was a sunlight on clouds glitch, the world survived a nuclear apocalypse triggered by a shiny sky. Number 18. In 1920, a young soldier named George Patton was tasked with testing a new type of armored vehicle that most generals thought was a useless toy. He was told to take it slow, but he decided to push the machine to its absolute limit, proving that mobile, fast-moving tanks were the future of war. It is like being told to drive a golf cart and deciding to enter it into a Formula One race, just to see if the wheels fall off. The smell of hot oil and the bone-rattling vibration of a steel track grinding against the unforgiving earth. Because of this one man's reckless curiosity, the entire doctrine of modern warfare shifted from stagnant trenches to lightning-fast blitzkriegs. Number 19. In 1859, a man named Thomas Austin released 24 rabbits onto his Australian estate so he could have something to hunt on the weekends. He figured a few bunnies wouldn't do any harm and that the vast continent could surely handle a couple of extra long-eared residents. It is like bringing a single dandelion into a pristine garden and waking up the next morning to find the entire neighborhood buried in yellow weeds. The sight of a small wooden crate being opened and the sound of soft paws hitting the grass for the very first time. Because of this one man's boring hobby, billions of rabbits overran the country, destroying entire ecosystems and costing the economy billions in agricultural damage. Number 20. In 1985, a group of scientists discovered a hole in the ozone layer and realized that common household chemicals were literally eating the sky. The world's governments actually listened and moved with unprecedented speed to ban the substances before the atmosphere dissolved completely. It's like realizing your house is on fire and actually grabbing an extinguisher instead of arguing about who left the stove on for 3 hours. The sterile hum of a laboratory and the sight of a graph showing a line plunging toward a zero that meant the end of all life. Because of this one rare moment of collective sanity, the ozone is actually healing today, proving that we are capable of fixing the disasters we create. We have reached the end of the line, where the sheer weight of these accidents finally collapses into the world you see outside your window. The final moments are the most terrifying because they prove that the difference between a golden age and a dark age is usually just a loose screw. Number 21. In 1917, the German High Command was desperate to knock Russia out of the war, so they decided to take a radical, unhinged gamble. They took a revolutionary named Vladimir Lenin, locked him in a sealed train car like a biological weapon, and shipped him across Europe into the heart of Russia. It is like finding a vial of a deadly virus in a lab and deciding to throw it into a crowded room just to see if it clears the air. The rhythmic clanking of train wheels on cold iron and the sight of a man with a goatee staring out a frosted window at a world he was about to set on fire. Because of this one calculated risk by the German military, the Soviet Union was born, leading to a century of Cold War tension and the nuclear shadow we still live under. Number 22. In 1945 at the Potsdam Conference, a translator reportedly made a catastrophic error in translating the Japanese word makasatsu in a formal response. The Japanese meant they were withholding comment for the time being, but the translation came out as silent contempt or a total arrogant rejection of the peace terms. It is like telling someone you need a minute to think about their offer and having them hear that you think they are a piece of garbage who doesn't deserve a reply. The scratch of a pen on a translation log and the heavy, humid silence of a room where the fate of millions was decided by a dictionary error. Because of this one single word being misinterpreted, the order was given to drop the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, changing the nature of human power forever. The marketing villain is the idea of certainty, the belief that we know exactly what we are doing as we march toward the edge of the cliff. History is not a textbook. It is a crime scene where the evidence has been tampered with by the survivors to make themselves look like heroes. The normies will go back to their comfortable stories about grand strategies and the inevitability of human progress. But you know the truth now. We are all just passengers on a bus where the driver is asleep, and the brakes were replaced with cardboard in 1994. World is a beautiful, terrifying accident, and the only thing more dangerous than the stupidity of the past is the arrogance of the present. Step over the debris, ignore the statues, and try to make it through tomorrow without accidentally starting a revolution with a typo. You've reached the final vault of the butterfly effect, where the air is thin and the logic is non-existent. If you are still standing, it means you've accepted that your entire life is just a byproduct of a series of cosmic oops moments. Number 23. In the 1850s, a French scientist was trying to create a better silk for the textile industry and decided to import gypsy moths to Massachusetts for a controlled experiment. A few moths escaped through a broken window during a storm, and the scientist figured a couple of bugs wouldn't be able to survive a harsh New England winter anyway. It is like accidentally dropping a single drop of red dye into the ocean and watching the entire Atlantic turn crimson by the following Tuesday. The sound of millions of tiny mandibles chewing through the leaves of an entire forest and the sight of skeletal trees stretching toward the sun. Because of this one broken window, an invasive species decimated millions of acres of American forests and permanently altered the ecology of a continent. Number 24. In 1911, a disgruntled former employee of the Louvre named Vincenzo Peruggia walked into the museum, took the Mona Lisa off the wall, and walked out the door. Before this theft, the painting was just one of many obscure Italian portraits that most visitors walked right past without a second glance. It's like a local garage band becoming the most famous group on Earth because someone stole their van and it made the national evening news. The sight of a blank, dusty space on a velvet wall and the panicked shouts of guards who realized they had been outsmarted by a guy in a smock. Because of this one bored thief, the Mona Lisa became a global icon and the most famous face in the history of art, simply because people love a mystery. Number 25. In 1947, a Bedouin goat herder was looking for a lost animal in the cliffs of the West Bank and threw a rock into a cave to see if the goat was hiding inside. He heard the sound of breaking pottery, climbed in to investigate, and discovered the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest known biblical manuscripts in existence. It is like trying to find your car keys under the couch and accidentally pulling out the original signed copy of the Magna Carta. The musty smell of ancient parchment and the sound of a stone shattering a clay jar that had been sealed for 2,000 years. Because of one lost goat and a lucky rock throw, the world's understanding of religious history and ancient linguistics was fundamentally rewritten. Number 26. In 2019, a single spark in a poorly maintained electrical cabinet or a discarded cigarette butt, the exact cause is still debated, lit a fire in the attic of Notre Dame Cathedral. The world watched in real time as 1,000 years of history burned because the fire alarm system was so needlessly complex that the guards checked the wrong building first. It is like watching a masterpiece be erased because the person holding the eraser couldn't figure out how to read a simple instruction manual. The orange glow reflecting off the same and the deafening crash of a lead-lined spire collapsing through a vaulted stone ceiling. Because of a confusing computer interface and a few minutes of hesitation, a global landmark was nearly lost, and the world was reminded that stone is not eternal. The final marketing villain is the illusion of control, the desperate lie that we are the masters of our own destiny. The truth is that we are all just leaves floating on a river of chaos, hoping that the next person to make a mistake doesn't take the whole world down with them. Stop looking for meaning in the ruins and start looking for the exit. We are deep in the fallout now, witnessing the moment the ripples of a single mistake turn into a tidal wave that drowns an entire era. If you're still looking for a grand design, you're looking at a mirage built by people who were too embarrassed to admit they tripped. Number 27. In 1908, a massive explosion flattened 800 square miles of Siberian forest with the force of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. If the Tunguska meteor had entered the atmosphere just a few hours later, it would have detonated directly over the city of St. Petersburg. The Russian government would have vanished, the revolution would have been vaporized, and the 20th century would have been a blank slate. It's like a bullet grazing your ear and realizing that a fraction of a millimeter is the only thing between you and a closed casket. The blinding white light that turned night into day and the sound of 80 million trees snapping like toothpicks in a single, silent second. Because of the Earth's rotation speed and a few hours of celestial timing, the course of modern political history was allowed to continue its slow-motion wreck. Number 28. In 1914, a British soldier named Henry Tandy had a wounded German corporal in his sights during a battle in the village of Marcoing. Tandy saw the man was hurt and couldn't bring himself to shoot a wounded soldier, so he let him crawl away into the safety of the tall grass. That corporal was Adolf Hitler, who later claimed he recognized Tandy and kept a newspaper clipping of the man's mercy as a trophy. It's like sparing a poisonous snake because you think it looks tired, only to have it come back and bite everyone you've ever loved. The smell of wet mud and the heavy, agonizing tension of a finger that decided to grant life to a monster. Because of this one moment of battlefield compassion, 60 million people died in the war that the spared corporal would eventually ignite. Number 29. In 1961, a single B-52 bomber carrying two 4-megatron nuclear bombs broke apart in mid-air over North Carolina. One of the bombs went through 5 of its 6 safety stages, and only a single low-voltage manual switch prevented a nuclear detonation on American soil. It is like dropping a glass vase and having it stop an inch from the floor because a stray piece of lint got caught in the air. The sight of a massive parachute billowing over a tobacco field and the terrifying hum of a weapon that was one click away from erasing the state. Because of one cheap, tiny plastic switch, the eastern seaboard wasn't turned into a glass crater by its own military. Number 30. In 1986, the Chernobyl disaster was triggered by a safety test that was delayed because the regional power grid controller didn't want to lose electricity during the day. The test was pushed to the night shift, run by an exhausted, unprepared crew who had never been trained on how to handle the specific reactor conditions. It's like trying to perform open-heart surgery for the first time at 3 a.m. because the hospital wanted to save money on the lighting bill. The metallic taste of ozone on the tongue and the eerie blue glow of a core that had decided to ignore the laws of physics. Because of a simple scheduling conflict, an entire region is still a radioactive ghost town and the Soviet Union's reputation was shattered beyond repair. You can't plan for the future when the present is being run by a series of unfortunate events and a complete lack of sleep. We are spiraling into the deep end where the butterfly effect doesn't just change history, it creates entirely new, cursed realities. If you still think the adults are in charge, this section is going to be the final nail in the coffin of your innocence. Number 31. In 1894, a priest saved a 4-year-old boy from drowning in the icy waters of the Inn River in Germany. The boy grew up to be the very same man who would later try to erase the priest's entire religion from the face of the earth. It's like pulling a drowning puppy out of a lake only to have it grow up into a 3-headed hellhound that devours your neighborhood. The bone-chilling cold of the water and the frantic splashing of a child who was seconds away from becoming a forgotten statistic. Because of this one act of instinctive heroism, the 20th century was gifted its most efficient architect of genocide, number 32. In 1910, a young lawyer in South Africa named Mahatma Gandhi was thrown off a train because he refused to move from the first-class carriage. The humiliation of that one cold night on a dark railway platform transformed a shy middle-class professional into a revolutionary firebrand. It is like a rude waiter being the primary reason an entire empire loses its most valuable colony 40 years later. The sound of a heavy suitcase hitting the dirt and the biting wind of the high veld on a man who had done nothing wrong. Because of one ticket collector's racism, the British Raj began to crumble, and the map of Asia was redrawn forever. Number 33. In 1991, a low-level Soviet bureaucrat mistakenly told a group of journalists that the travel restrictions at the Berlin Wall were being lifted immediately. The orders were actually supposed to be gradual and controlled, but thousands of people rushed the gates and the guards were too confused to shoot. It's like a typo in a company memo accidentally giving every employee a $1 million bonus and a permanent vacation. The sound of hammers hitting concrete and the sight of 1,000 strangers hugging in a place where they used to kill each other. Because of one man's slip of the tongue during a boring press conference, the Iron Curtain fell and the Cold War ended in a single chaotic weekend. Number 34. In 1791, King Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette almost escaped the French Revolution because their getaway carriage was too heavy and moved too slowly. The king insisted on traveling in a massive luxury berline that was loaded with silver dinnerware and a portable wine cellar instead of a fast, light cart. It is like trying to outrun a police chase in a double-decker bus filled with grand pianos and lead weights. The smell of expensive leather and the sight of a frantic crowd catching up to a carriage that was sinking into the mud of its own excess. Because of a literal silver spoon and the refusal to travel like a commoner, the monarchy was abolished and the guillotine became the new national symbol of France. The world is just a series of what-ifs that went the wrong way because someone couldn't leave their luggage behind. We have reached the edge of the abyss, and the view from here is nothing but a long line of people tripping over their own feet. This is the final destination, where we realize the grand design of history is actually just a chaotic pile of what have I done. And number 35. In 1913, Adolf Hitler, Leon Trotsky, Joseph Stalin, and Joseph Broz Tito were all living in the same few square miles of central Vienna. They were all struggling, bitter, and frequenting the same cafes, yet they never once managed to get into a bar fight that could have changed the century. It's like having 4 of the world's most dangerous chemicals stored in the same leaky cabinet, and somehow none of them touched until they were unleashed on the world. The smell of stale coffee and the sight of 4 men who would go on to kill millions, all sitting within walking distance of each other in a city of art. Because no one in Vienna bothered to start a productive argument or a fistfight with the wrong person. The 4 most violent ideologies of the modern age were allowed to brew in silence. Number 36. In 1983, a single man named Stanislav Petrov chose to ignore his computer's warning that 5 American nuclear missiles were headed for Moscow. The system was malfunctioning due to a rare alignment of sunlight on high-altitude clouds, but the protocol demanded he push the button for total retaliation. It is like seeing a reflection in a window and deciding not to shoot your neighbor because you realize it as just a trick of the light. The silence of a bunker, and the blinding sweat on the forehead of a man who held the life of every person on earth in his trembling hand. Because one man dared to be a bad soldier and disobey his orders, you are alive today to hear this story instead of being radioactive ash. The ultimate marketing villain is the idea that everything happens for a reason, a lie we tell ourselves so we don't have to face the terrifying randomness of our existence. The world is a skyscraper built by people who didn't use a level and forgot to check if the concrete was actually dry. History isn't a classroom. It's a series of narrow misses and lucky breaks that we have the audacity to call destiny. The normies are going back to sleep now, convinced that the experts have everything under control and the future is secure. But you know that the next world-ending disaster is probably being caused right now by a guy who forgot to set his alarm clock or an intern who hit reply all. Try to enjoy the view while the house of cards is still standing, because the wind is picking up and someone left the window open. The next time you see a visionary leader, just remember, they're probably one wrong turn away from accidentally deleting the continent.